The raven would not stop staring at him. Its beak clicked against the ring of dark iron on its leg, tapping a nervous rhythm as if it knew, somehow, that what it carried was heavier than parchment and wax. Snow swirled about the yard, blown in thin veils from the shadow of the wall. Men of the Night's Watch moved through it like ghosts, dragging sledges, hauling firewood, shouting to one another through scarves wrapped over their mouths. The usual clamor of Castle Black, the scrape and clank and muttered curses. Yet the sound seemed distant to Jon Snow, as if a door had been closed between him and the rest of the world. The raven shifted its claws, feathers puffed against the cold. Ghost stood at Jon's heel, pale as the drifting flakes, head low, red eyes fixed on the bird. His jaw twitched in a silent growl that Jon felt in the tension of the direwolf's body rather than heard. The animal had never liked ravens, but this was something else. Ghost was uneasy in a way Jon could not name. "Bring it inside before you lose a finger," piped a thin voice behind him. Maester Aemon stood in the arch of the door leading up to his tower, a bundle of gray wool and old bone. The wind worried at his chain and set it chiming softly. Samwell Tarly hovered beside him, cheeks already reddening, arms full of split logs bound with frayed rope. Jon turned, forcing his fingers to relax around the raven's legs. "It came from the south," he said, "from a maester's tower, not one of ours. The band on its leg is different." "I can smell the Riverlands from here," Sam muttered, shifting his firewood uncomfortably. "Or maybe that's just the bird." "Come," Aemon said, "let us see what tidings the south sends to the forgotten." There was no bitterness in his tone, only the faint, dry humor of an old man who had watched the turning of many courts and councils. "Sam, the wood can wait. The snow will not burn the stores if it is left alone for a moment." Sam bobbed his head, almost dropping his bundle in his haste to follow. Jon fell into step beside them, Ghost padding silently after. The direwolf brushed past Aemon with a soft huff, then glanced back as if urging Jon to hurry. Jon laid a hand on his flank as they climbed the steep, creaking steps to the maester's chambers. Inside, the air was warmer, thick with the smell of tallow, parchment, and the sharp, comforting bite of herbs drying from the rafters. Aemon's table was a battlefield of scrolls and letters, some sealed, some broken, some left unrolled beneath half-melted candles, each bearing a portion of the realm's woes. Jon set the raven on its perch, unfastened the iron band, and slit the wax with his thumb. His breath caught when he saw the direwolf stamped there. It was a crude impression, blurred at the edges by the cold, but unmistakable. A gray wolf, its head thrown back in a silent howl. House Stark. His heart was suddenly hammering in his throat. He broke the seal and unfolded the parchment. The script was bold, forceful, a hand that pressed hard enough to bite the quill deep into the fibers. "To the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch," he read softly, eyes dancing over the lines. "From Robb Stark, King in the North." He had to stop for a heartbeat. The words swam. "Read," Aemon said gently. "My eyes are not what they were, Jon." Jon swallowed and continued. Robb wrote of war and treaties, of the need for grain and men, of the Frey's wounded pride and the wedding that must heal it. A son of Walder Frey would take a daughter of the Tullus to wife at the Twins, beneath the painted beams of that ill-omened hall, to show goodwill, and to bind the River Lord more tightly to his cause. Robb would attend in person with his mother and bannermen. "We ask for a man of the Night's Watch, a sworn brother, to stand as witness," Jon read. "For men say Lord Walder Frey remembers only slights, never oaths, and even a lord as prickly as he will think twice before he spills blood before the Black. The Night's Watch stands apart from all quarrels of crown and kingdom, and I would have that remembered. The old gods watch the wall. Let the Black brothers watch this crossing in their name." At the bottom was a name that made Jon's throat burn. Robb Stark, by his own hand. The letters blurred again. 4 years, that hand had scrawled crude maps of Winterfell's godswood, had signed his name beside Jon's in childish games of kings and lords. Now it commanded men and carved the fate of kingdoms. Your brother is a king, Sam said softly. You never told me what his seal looked like. He is not my brother, Jon said automatically, the old habit rising from somewhere deep and sore. He is my father's son by his lady wife. I am. You are his brother where it matters. Aemon cut across him, blind eyes lifting to find Jon's face with uncanny certainty. Blood is more than names in a ledger. What else does he say? Jon looked back down, forcing himself to concentrate. There was a line near the end, wedged in that did not quite fit with the rest. An extra sentence, clumsier, less certain, as if written after thought. If Jon Snow yet lives and serves upon the wall, it would please me to know a man of Winterfell stands there, even if we cannot speak. He read, voice roughening. Tell him that I remember the snowball that knocked me from my horse the day I first sat a saddle, and that I still owe him for it. The parchment shook in his hands. Sam sniffed in a way that suggested he might weep. Jon folded the letter carefully, knuckles white. Well, Sam said, that's good, isn't it? He wants you to know that he thinks of you, that he hasn't forgotten. He wants a man of the watch there, Jon said. Not me, the Lord Commander. The Lord Commander is not here, Aemon reminded him. Jeor Mormont is ash and bone, gone with the others at Craster's Keep. The brothers have yet to choose another, for they argue and hesitate while the dead grow strong. There. His blind gaze fell to the letter as if it were a coal he could feel the heat of. But the watch must still answer, even leaderless. A raven that goes unanswered becomes a story of neglect. Jon thought of Robb, somewhere in the south, surrounded by banners and treacherous smiles. He thought of Lord Walder Frey, whom he had never met, but had heard of in snatches, proud, spiteful, clinging to his dusty bridge like a crab to its rock. He thought of the way Ghost had bristled when the raven arrived, and of the way the air had felt sharp and wrong, as if the wind carried distant screaming. I should go, Jon said very quietly. Sam made an alarmed noise. Go? But Jon, you know what they'll say. The men, the stewards, Ser Alliser, they'll call you a traitor. Again. You've only just come back. I would not go for Robb, Jon said, nor for any king. I would go as the letter asks for the watch, as a witness. And if that witness must stand between swords and a slaughter? Aemon asked. Jon met his blind eyes. Then he will stand. Ghost's low growl rumbled like distant thunder. The Night's Watch takes no part, Sam said, as if reciting catechism, clinging to the words like a man to driftwood. We guard the realms of men, all the realms, and we do not serve any king. That's what we say when we take the vows. You can't go south to help your brother win some wedding. I'm not going to help him win anything, Jon retorted. I'm going to stand there so an old lord remembers he's a man, not a butcher. If I wear black, every other banner in that hall knows that whatever happens, word will reach the wall untouched by southern tongues. Sam shifted his considerable weight from one foot to the other. That sounds very noble, but I can't see Ser Alliser agreeing, or Bowen Marsh, or anyone who thinks you still have wildling snow in your hair. Jon's jaw tightened at the memory of whispering voices, the sideways glances, the muttered half a crow and traitor that had followed his return from Mance Raider's camp. He remembered Ygritte's eyes when the arrows flew, the way she had looked at him as if his very existence were an act of betrayal. He pushed the thought aside. He could not carry every guilt at once. Some would have to wait. Maester, he said, turning back to Aemon. If the watch ignores this, if Robb Stark goes to a Frey hall and no Black Brother stands to see, what does that say to the realm? That we are deaf when called upon. That we will not come, even for the asking. It says, Aemon murmured, that the wall is very far from the twins, and that we have few men to spare. It says that winter comes, and we huddle our strength to meet it. It might say, to one who looks closely, that the watch is leaderless and uncertain, like an old man who cannot find his walking stick. He reached out, fingers fumbling along the edge of the table until they found the raven's leg band. He turned it between thumb and forefinger, feeling the ridged metal as if it were braille for the blind. But it might also say something else. That when a king in the north asks for a single man to stand between him and dishonor, the Night's Watch looks at its numbers and finds none. That when oaths and meat and marriage are to be made at a crossing watched over by an old and prickly lord, no one cares to watch save those who already stand to gain. A lonely signal that, one to make a man think he can do as he wills beneath his own roof, unobserved. So we send someone, Jon pressed. Anyone. Donal Noy, Cotter Pike. Any man the brothers will respect. Make it a command, Maester. Call a vote if you must. But send someone. You have already chosen who you wish to go, Aemon said simply. And I think you know as well as I do that if this must be done, none of the others will press for it. Sam looked between them in alarm. You can't say he should go, Maester. You can't. He only just convinced them not to hang him for breaking his vows with the wildlings. If he leaves again. I did not say he should, Aemon replied, turning his head toward the sound of Sam's voice. I am too old to command a man's feet when my own barely carry me from bed to chair. But I will say this, Jon Snow. He reached out, and Jon, after a heartbeat, stepped forward, letting the old man's hands find his face. The wrinkled fingers traced his jaw, his cheeks, the curve of his mouth, as if they could read truths there that eyes could not. When I was a young man, Aemon said, I watched a king drown himself in wine and foolishness while his counselors sharpened knives. I told myself that my duty was to the citadel, to the order, and not to one king or another, that I would serve who was placed before me. I watched, and I did nothing, and in the end the realm burned, and I took the black to escape the ashes. His hands fell away, shaking. There will come a day when you must choose, Jon Snow. Between oaths that bind you and blood that calls you, between standing apart and stepping in. If you are fortunate, you will see that choice clearly and have time to consider it. Most men are not so fortunate. He gestured vaguely toward the wall. The cold will not wait for us to decide its shape, nor will war. Is this that day? Jon asked. I do not know, Aemon said, but I know this. A raven does not fly from a king's camp to a windswept wall lightly. Something drove Robb Stark to send a letter north when all his prayer should be for grain and swords. He remembers you. He thinks of a snowball and a horse and a childish fall in the yard. That is not a king speaking. It is a brother, reaching out through all the names that have grown between you. Sam's voice was small. If you go, you might die there, or be taken prisoner, or hanged as a spy. If I stay, Jon said, surprising himself with the calm in his own tone, he might die alone. The room seemed to close around them, the candle flames steady and unmoving. Somewhere above, on the wall, a horn blew once, the long low note for a change of watch. The sound rolled down the stones like a promise. Then go, Aemon said at last. Do not ask leave of men who will not grant it. Take brothers you trust and a letter from my hand attesting that you ride as observers only. If the gods are kind, you will witness a dull wedding and return with a tale of sour wine and poorer music. And if they are not kind? Jon asked. Aemon's blind eyes turned toward him. Then remember that you are a Stark and a Crow, and that both names mean you do not run when darkness gathers. The armory stank of oil and old sweat, of leather left too long in the damp. Racks of spears leaned like skeletal trees along the walls, their points dark against the flicker of the torches. Swords hung in ordered rows, most nicked and worn, some older than the stones that held them. Jon moved among them, running his fingers along hilts, feeling for familiar weights. Longclaw hung at his hip, Mormont's bear now a snarling wolf upon the pommel, as natural there as if it had been forged so. But the others who rode with him would need steel that would not break at the first taste of Frey treachery. Not that one, Donal Noy grunted, watching from his stool by the anvil. The smith cradled his stump against his chest, iron hand resting on his knee. That blade's half cracked along the fuller. You give it a good swing at some lordling's skull, and you'll find yourself holding a hilt and air. Jon set the sword back without argument. What about PYP? What about him? Noy snorted. He swings like he's trying to charm the steel into cutting for him, but he's quick on his feet and quicker with that tongue. Men undervalue a fool until he's in their cups. Then tell him every secret they've ever held close. Take him if you like. I thought I might, Jon said. He had already spoken to PYP, Gren, and Dolorous Ed in the dim corridor outside the hall where the brothers muttered over their stew. PYP had grinned like a man offered an adventure in a song. Gren had looked bewildered for a full minute and then nodded stubbornly, and Ed had sighed so deeply it had sounded like a grave being filled. If a king's wedding is to be ruined, Ed had said, it might as well be ruined while I'm there to complain about the food. Jon's mouth twitched at the memory. If he rode south, he would not do it alone. He had learned that much with Corn Halfhand, and again with Mance Raider. A lone man was a morsel. A company was a harder thing to swallow. 6, he said now, more to himself than Noy. No more. Aemon will write a letter saying we are envoys to remind Lord Walder of our neutrality. If we ride in with half the watch, he'll think we mean to put him under siege. Oh, we wouldn't want that, Noy said dryly. Gods forbid we have an old man with a bridge by the stones. Bowen Marsh will shit himself when he hears you've gone. He won't hear until I'm already gone, Jon replied. We leave at dawn. Noy grunted approval and spat into the ashes. Take decent cloaks. You won't impress anyone if you arrive looking like drowned cats. And make sure your horse is sound. You don't want to limp into the twins with a lame gelding. Men like Frey look at a man's mount the way they look at his sword. If one is shabby, they assume the other is as well. Ghost padded after Jon as he moved along the racks, selecting blades and spears, checking the edges with his thumb. The direwolf's ears were pricked, his nose sampling the armory's stale air. Every time Jon's hand hovered over a particular sword or dagger, Ghost seemed to lean toward or away from it, as if choosing for him. Jon did not question it. There were worse instincts to trust. Later, in the dim barracks, he sat with his chosen brothers. PYP juggled a dagger and nearly sliced his ear off. Gren methodically packed and repacked his saddlebag. Dolorous Ed stared at the rafters as if counting the splinters. We're going to a wedding, PYP said. I've never been to one. I once snuck into a sept and listened at the door, but that hardly counts. Do you think they'll have singers? I hope they have singers. The last time I heard music at Castle Black, it was Toad trying to tune a lute with his teeth. It'll be some old goat bleating songs about how his bridge never falls, Ed muttered. Or about how every guest leaves with fewer fingers than they came with. Phrase, they've too many sons altogether. One of them's bound to be a singer. Ed, Jon said, if we are lucky, we'll sit at the back, drink some sour wine, listen to tuneless harping, and then ride home. If we're lucky, Ed said, the wall will fall while we're gone and we won't have to come back. But my luck's never been that good. Gren looked up, brow furrowed. You really think your brother sent for us just to listen to some music? I think he sent for someone to stand where the killing would be if there's going to be any killing, Jon answered. A man of the watch in black says that whatever happens there, it will be seen by eyes that do not bow to kings. Men behave differently under that gaze. Some men, PYP said. Others just make sure to kill the man in black first. Jon could not argue. He felt the weight of Longclaw like a promise at his hip. He thought again of Robb's last line, of the snowball that had toppled a boy king off a pony in the Winterfell yard. It had seemed such a small cruelty then, such a small joke. But every path that had brought him here had been built of such small stones. He lay awake long after the others slept, listening to Gren's snores, to Ed's occasional grumble, to PYP murmuring through some dream of girls and music. Ghost lay stretched beside his pallet, head on his paws, eyes open and unblinking. Whenever Jon's breathing changed, the direwolf's ears flicked, as if reminding him that he was not alone inside his thoughts. In the darkness behind his eyes, he saw a hall of ugly stone lit by smoky torches. Men in gray and blue and red sat at trestle tables, hands full of meat and cups full of wine. A lanky man with a sharp face and sharper smile lifted a goblet in a mocking toast. At his side, a girl with copper hair twisted a torn sleeve in her fists. Music played, a gentle, lilting song that broke off suddenly, then began again in a different key, harder, like metal on bone. In the dream, there was blood on the rushes long before anyone saw a knife. He woke with the taste of it in his mouth and Ghost's breath warm on his face. They rode out at dawn beneath a sky the color of dirty wool. No horn marked their departure. No brothers lined the yard to see them off. Jon had left a letter with Maester Aemon, another with Sam, each with words that might be read as explanation or apology or both. He had not gone near the hall where Bowen Marsh and Othel Yarwick argued over repairs to the east wall. By the time they noticed his absence, he would be days down the King's Road, beyond easy recall. The crunch of hooves on frozen ground was their morning song. Castle Black shrank behind them, its towers mere black teeth against the great white wall. The wall itself watched them go, mute and indifferent. Jon felt its presence like a gaze between his shoulder blades. "Never thought I'd see the south again," Ed said on the second day, eyeing the thinning snow. "I was hoping if I ever left the wall, it would be feet first, carried by some sobbing brother who couldn't bear the loss of me. Instead, I'm riding toward a Frey feast. Life's a cruel jester." "You ever seen the twins?" PYP asked. "No," Ed replied. "And from what I hear, that's one of the few blessings the gods ever granted me. 2 towers, a bridge, a lord with more bastards than teeth. They say he once tried to marry his own reflection but couldn't because the Septon refused to bless the looking glass." Gren laughed, then looked unnerved by the sound echoing strangely in the bare trees. War had come this way, and it had not passed gently. The King's Road was scarred by cart ruts and hooves, by old campfires and deeper gouges where something heavier had been dragged. Once, they passed a burned wagon half sunk in the mud, its iron fittings twisted, a child's doll lying face down beside it, its cloth body blackened. Jon reined in long enough to right the toy, setting it on the wagon's charred edge. Its painted eyes stared emptily at the trees. "Riverlands," he said softly. "Every mile is a wound." "I thought the king in the north was winning," Gren said. "They called him the Young Wolf. Said he beat the Lannisters every time they met." "He wins his battles," Jon answered. "Battles are not the same as a war, and each victory leaves marks like these. The Freys see them. So do the men who ride behind him, whose fields burn while he feasts in other men's halls." "You think they'll turn on him?" PYP asked. "I think," Jon said reluctantly, "that men like Walder Frey do not forgive easily, and they do not forget that they were once slighted by a boy with a crown." He did not say that he had seen that same stubborn pride in lords at Winterfell, in bannermen who had shrugged at his existence, in Catelyn Stark's cool gaze. Pride turned as easily to treachery as loyalty, if fed the right diet of fear and insult. At night, they found what shelter they could. A farmer's abandoned barn, a collapsed watchtower, the lee of an earthen mound that had once been part of some long-forgotten fortification. They kept their fires low and their horses mounted, Ghost ranging the darkness in wide circles, a pale shadow among dead trees. On the 4th night, as they camped beside a half-frozen stream, Jon dreamed again. He stood in a hall, the air thick with smoke and roasting meat. Men shouted, laughed, clanked cups together. At the high table, Robb Stark sat beside Catelyn Stark, both of them crowned in stale greenery. A woman Jon had never seen leaned close to Robb, her hand warm on his arm. Lord Walder Frey smiled from across the way, his lips thin as a knife. The musicians changed their tune. The sound threaded through the dream like a noose. Ghost whined at his feet, nails scrabbling on the stone floor. Jon looked up and saw arrows in the rafters, waiting. He woke with a choke, hand already on Longclaw's hilt. Ghost stood over him, fur bristling, ears pinned back. The direwolf's lips were peeled from his teeth in a silent snarl, eyes fixed on the south. "What is it?" Gren mumbled, rolling over. "Nothing," Jon lied, though his heart hammered. "Just a dream." "Dreams?" Ed sighed from his blanket. "Are messages from the gods telling us we're not dead yet. Once you stop dreaming, you start rotting. I'd rather have nightmares than worms, personally." Jon lay back, staring at the stars peeking through the ragged clouds. He thought of Bran and Rickon, of the way Bran had sometimes looked at him with eyes that saw more than they should. He thought of the old gods and the faces carved into weirwood. If they sent warnings, they did it in riddles and shivers, not in plain words. Still, he could not shake the sense that he rode toward something that had already begun without him. The twins rose from the river like two squat, ugly fists. The towers were not graceful things. They had the look of stones piled in haste and never properly smoothed, their arrow loops like small, mean eyes. A stone bridge joined them, arched over the green-brown water of the Trident. Its parapets hung with banners that had seen better days. The crowned stag and lion of the late King Robert Baratheon were faded, their colors leached by weather, but the twin towers of House Frey flapped proudly on every side. The banners of House Stark and House Tully rode toward them on the wind. Robb Stark sat his horse like he had been born in the saddle, though weariness hollowed his cheeks and drew faint shadows beneath his eyes. His auburn hair was tied back from his face, a faint line of stubble along his jaw making him look older than his years. Grey Wind paced restlessly beside his mount, hackles raised, nose twitching at the scents wafting from the river and the stone. Catelyn Stark rode at her son's side, her tully blue cloaks pulled tight about her shoulders. Each clop of her horse's hooves seemed to echo in her chest. The last time she had crossed this bridge, she had bargained her daughter's safety with a man's wounded pride. It had seemed a thin rope to hang hope upon even then. Now she felt every frayed thread of it. Lord Walder Frey waited in the gatehouse, flanked by sons and grandsons like a king among scarecrows. His skinny neck jutted from his high collar, his watery eyes bright with an eagerness that looked too much like hunger. When Robb rode up, the old man's lips peeled back in what might have been meant for a smile. "King in the North," Walder said, the title dripping from his tongue like gruel. "Come to mend what you broke. Have you? I had half a mind to close my gates and let you swim the Trident with your crown around your neck." "You would not refuse guest right to your own blood, Lord Frey?" Catelyn said sharply before Robb could answer. "Not after my son has come to you in good faith, to honor the terms you set." Walder's eyes slid to her with the slow coldness of a snake. "Lady Catelyn, still speaking as if you have the ordering of this. You're far from Riverrun here, but it's true enough. I do not fling meat from my own table lightly, not when I can wring a better feast from it by being gracious." He turned back to Robb, his expression sly. "So, you tossed aside the sweet girl I chose for you and took another to wife, all for love. Romantics make poor kings. But you bring me a bride for one of mine, and you bring your banners, and you come yourself with cap in hand. That counts for something." Robb held himself still. "I come to make amends, my lord, and to bind House Frey and House Stark more tightly than before. The North will not forget those who stood with it in its hour of need. Nor will it forget those who stood aside," Catelyn added, her gaze steady. Walder sniffed. "Well, you're here now, aren't you? That's something. You'll have guessed right, all of you, and we'll eat and drink and make the best of a poor bargain." He peered past Robb, eyes narrowing. "Where's the wolf girl? The one you promised me once. Arya, was it? I hear she's run off and taken up with outlaws. Hardly proper, that." Catelyn's hands tightened on her reins. "My daughter is lost to us," she said. "If you have news of her, I would hear it." Walder's teeth showed. "If I had her, you'd be the first to know. I'd fetch her myself to watch you swallow your own promises." He chuckled. "But no matter. You've brought me something else, haven't you?" His gaze flicked toward the warband behind them. "Many somethings." Robb inclined his head. "Our men will be your guests as well, Lord Frey, if it please you. We ask bread and salt beneath your roof." "Oh, you'll have bread and salt," Walder said. "You'll have more than that. My cooks have been sweating over their pots for days." Never let it be said that Walder Frey does not put on a show when a king comes begging. Grey Wind growled, low and dangerous. Robb reached down, fingers tangling in the fur at his neck, soothing. The direwolf's golden eyes never left Walder Frey. Catelyn's stomach nodded. She told herself it was only the memory of past slights, of the old man's leering gaze on her daughters, of the way he had touched her hand too long in the hall. She told herself that Grey Wind smelled only the crushed grass, the river, the sweat of too many horses in too small a space. Behind them, the banners rustled. The wind tugged at the Blackfish of Tully, at the grey direwolf, at the silvery trout. Somewhere, a raven perched on a tower's crenel, feathers ruffled, eyes bright. It watched them enter the twins. From the hilltop, the twins looked almost pretty. The river caught the last light of the sinking sun and turned it to molten brass. The stone bridge a narrow strip of shadow across its back. Torches pricked the towers and walls, tiny flames against the thickening dusk. From this distance, the squat towers seemed less ugly, their bulk softened by mist and fading color. Arya Stark stood in the heather, fists clenched at her sides, and tried to count how many banners flew at the gate. "That's a wolf," she said, squinting. "I know it is. I'd know the dire wolf anywhere." Sandor Clegane snorted beside her. "And that one's a fish, and that one's another goat pretending to be a lion. You think they'd hang pretty flags if there wasn't slaughter underneath them? I've seen more men die under bright colors than in any gutter." "It's my home," Arya said. "My family. My mother is there. My brother. If we'd ridden faster, you could have taken me to them before they went in." "I could have." "Could have what?" Sandor's burnt face twisted as he turned toward her. "You think your pretty wolf brooch would have changed a man like Walder Frey? You think he'd let you in his hall with that mouth and that sword and say, 'Oh, the girl's here. Best be polite now?'" She glared at him. "I've a right to be there. I'm a Stark of Winterfell. And you're also a half-starved mite in a dirty cloak with a face like a kicked cat," he said. "They see you, they'll see a hostage before they see a daughter. You want to be used for some old man's sport? Put in a dress and sold like a cow." She turned back to the twins. Her throat felt hot, her eyes hotter. I want to see them, make sure they're real. The last time I saw Robb, he was marching south. The last time I saw Mother, she was crying over father's bones. What if I've made them up now? In my head. What if they're all ready?" She could not finish. The word stuck in her like a knife. The Hound was silent for a moment. The wind tugged at his ragged cloak, at Arya's hair, at the distant banners. "They're real enough," he said at last. "I can hear the drums, smell the roasting meat. Freys don't waste good stock on ghosts. They're feasting them, girl, pouring wine down their throats, so they forget they're in the lion's jaws." "That's worse," Arya muttered. "I'd rather be dead than eat at Walder Frey's table." "You say that now," Sandor said. "You've never starved proper. I have. Bread and salt looks like a kiss from the maiden herself when your belly thinks your ribs are a feast." He shifted, restless. His hand went to his sword hilt, then fell away, then returned, as if his fingers could not decide whether they wanted slaughter or stillness. "A feast means they'll be drunk by midnight," he went on. "Drunk men are easier to steal. We get closer as the night goes on. Slip in among the carts. Or the river. You're small enough to fit where a fat guard can't. We wait till they piss out all that wine. Then we go." Arya chewed her lip. The idea of waiting made her skin itch. Every heartbeat that passed was another heartbeat where something might go wrong inside those ugly towers. A gust of wind brought a faint thread of sound up the hill to them. The distant thump of drums, the high, thin skirl of pipes. "They're already playing music," she said. "Better than playing funeral songs," Sandor replied. "Come on. No sense standing here like a lightning rod. We get closer, but not too close. You want them to see you before we're ready." Arya shook her head, jaw set. She cast one last look at the twins, at the twin towers that held the taste of Winterfell in their shadows. In her mind, she saw Robb turning to the door, saw her mother's face lighting with shocked joy as she ran into the hall, as she shouted, "It's me! It's Arya! I'm here!" The wind snatched the image away. She followed the Hound down the hill. By the time Jon Snow and his brothers saw the twins, night had wrapped itself around the river like a black cloak. The towers loomed out of the darkness, their outlines picked in fire. Torches burned along the parapets, in the gatehouses, at intervals along the length of the bridge, their flames whipped sideways by the wind. The water below was a black mass shot through with restless reflections. Ghost stopped dead on the rise overlooking the causeway, every hair along his back standing up. A growl rose from his chest, deep and unbreaking. "What's got into him?" PYP whispered, reining in beside Jon. He didn't act like this at any other holdfast. Jon said nothing for a moment, listening. The music reached them like a distant echo. Drums, the thin whine of pipes, the rise and fall of men's voices singing. Laughter rode the breeze, but there was an edge to it that pricked the hairs on his arms. "Smell it," it said quietly. "Meat, wine, and something underneath. Always the same wherever you go. They say every castle smells different, but I swear they all stink of fear if you sniff long enough." "The fear might be yours," PYP muttered. "It's ours," Jon said. "And ghosts. And there's inside that hall as well, whether they know it yet or not." He swung down from his saddle and knelt beside Ghost, burying his hand in the direwolf's thick fur. "Easy," he murmured into a pricked ear. "We'll go slow. You can snarl at anyone who touches you that doesn't smell like a Stark." Ghost's lips curled, showing a flash of white teeth. At the gatehouse on the near bank, Frey guards watched the road with bored expressions and loosened belts, bellies full of food and drink. When Jon and his black-cloaked companions approached, one straightened, squinting. "Who in all 7 hells are you?" he called down. "We've no room for more wretches. The hall's fit to bursting already. Go sleep under a hedge." Jon pushed back his hood so the torchlight could find his face. "Jon Snow of the Night's Watch," he called up. "We come from the wall at the request of King Robb Stark, to stand as witnesses at his wedding feast. Maester Aemon of Castle Black has penned a letter to Lord Walder Frey in confirmation." He held the parchment up. The guard eyed it as if it might bite him. "Night's Watch?" another man said, leaning on the crenel. "They're all dead or running about with wildlings, I heard." "What's the wall to do with us?" "We guard the realms of men," Jon said. "Last I looked, your bridge stood in those realms. Or has Lord Frey seceded without telling anyone?" PYP made a small choking sound that might have been a smothered laugh. The men on the wall conferred among themselves, their words carried away by the wind. Jon waited, every heartbeat ringing like a hammer. At last, a younger guard with straw-colored hair peered down. "You've got a wolf," he said. "Lord Walder doesn't like wolves near his hall." "Then he should not have invited a Stark," Jon replied, and Ghost let out a soft, rumbling sound that might have been agreement. The guard blinked, then vanished from the parapet. Moments later, the smaller sally gate beside the main portcullis creaked open. The straw-haired man stepped out, torch in hand, expression pinched. "Bring the letter," he said. "I'll take you to the steward. If he says you can go in, you can go in. If not, you can sit outside and gnaw on whatever scraps are left." "And the wolf?" Jon asked. "The wolf comes or it stays," the man said. "But if it bites anyone, Lord Walder will have it flayed for a rug." Jon's smile was thin. "He can try." They led their horses behind the guard, feet echoing on the stone. The courtyard within was crowded with carts, campfires, and men too drunk or too lowly to be given a place in the hall. The smell hit Jon like a physical blow. Roasted meat, spilled ale, sweat, smoke. Ghost sneezed and shook himself, then drifted ahead, nose low, tracking scents only he could read. At the door to the main hall, the steward met them, a weaselly man with a receding hairline and a perpetually damp brow. He took the letter with a grudging inclination of his head, his fingers leaving greasy smears on the parchment. His lips moved as he read, sounding out the words under his breath. Maester Aemon, Castle Black, bygone brother of the crown. Neutrality witness, he muttered. Finally, he looked up at Jon with a pinched expression. My lord won't like it. Does he mean to turn away the night's watch? Jon asked. The steward hesitated. Turning away the watch was a serious thing. That much even a Frey servant knew. There's no seats left in the hall, he said. He won't want more mouths at his tables. Maybe we put you up in the gallery. You sit quiet. You watch. Nobody notices you. That will do, Jon said. A high vantage point was more useful than a place at the high table, in truth. From above, he could see the whole hall. The whole trap, if trap it was. Ghost's growl deepened as the steward led them toward the doors. It vibrated through the stones beneath Jon's boots. Easy, Jon whispered again, though the word felt thin and foolish. If there's trouble, you'll be the first to know. Ghost's red eyes met his. What Jon saw there chilled him more than the wind off the wall. The dire wolf did not look uncertain. He looked certain of one thing only: blood. The noise hit him first. The great hall of the twins was a long, low tunnel of smoke and sound. Men packed the trestle tables from wall to wall, their voices clanging against the stone like pots thrown down a stair. Laughter, shouts, the occasional drunken roar when someone spilled wine or dropped a trencher. Torches guttered in iron sconces, their flames licking soot onto the rafters, where the shadows of beams and banners crisscrossed like bars. From the narrow walkway of the gallery, Jon could see the whole of it laid out below. The Starks and Tullis and Freys were not separate. Their colors were muddled, their men mixed at the tables, a calculated gesture of unity that somehow looked more like confusion. The smell of roasting meat, wine, onions and sweat climbed up to him in waves. Somewhere near the back, a man had been sick on the rushes and not bothered to move. At the high table, Robb Stark sat the central seat, a circlet of bronze and iron on his brow. Catelyn Stark sat to his left, her face composed but pale, hands folded in her lap when they were not reaching for her cup. To Robb's right, a slender girl with dark hair and a Tully's blue cloak, Jane Westerling, Jon knew her name to be, smiled nervously at something Edmure Tully was saying. Lord Walder Frey sat a little apart, slightly elevated, as if to remind everyone whose hall this was. His sons and grandsons flanked him, a row of pale, sharp faces, some bored, some avid. Behind them, servants moved with hurried precision, filling cups and replacing platters. Jon's breath caught when he saw Grey Wind. The dire wolf lay chained at the far end of the hall, near the doors, a cruelly thick iron collar around his neck. He watched the proceedings with bared teeth, the hair along his spine standing in a ridge. Men gave him a wide berth, but some tossed bones in his direction when they thought no one was looking, as if taunting a caged beast. 7 hells, PYP whispered at Jon's shoulder. They chained him. Why in the bloody depths would they chain a wolf like that? Janei Frey's shrill laughter cut through the din, followed by the sound of cups being raised. Someone called for a song. The musicians, huddled near a corner where the hall narrowed slightly, strummed their lutes and fiddles uncertainly, then launched into a tune that sounded half martial, half merry. Jon's eyes swept the hall again, more slowly this time. In the rafters, above the beams, he saw narrow gaps where the darkness seemed deeper than it should. Arrow slits, cleverly concealed. Along the walls, freemen in Frey colors leaned, pretending to drink, their hands never far from the hilts of their swords. The doors at either end of the hall were unbarred, but he could see the iron braces nearby, ready. The whole place felt like a sprung trap being held open by a trembling hand. Ghost pressed close against his leg, fur brushing the rough wood of the gallery rail. The direwolf's nose worked furiously, sampling the scents below. He made a low sound when his gaze passed over Grey Wind, a note of recognition edged with fury. "You see what I see?" Jon murmured, barely moving his lips. "Men," Dolorous Ed said faintly behind him. "Too many men with too many blades and not enough wit. Crossbow slits up there. That man by the left door has a dagger in his boot. That one by the barrels keeps touching his sleeve like there's a knife up there. I see a lot I'd rather not. I see a hall full of food," Gren whispered. "I can't believe that wolf's not torn someone's throat out already." "Because he's chained," Jon said. "And because his master trusts the vow of his host more than the growl of his own blood." He could not blame Robb for that. Guest right was older than the Iron Throne, older than the Undulls, as old as bread and salt. To break it was to invite the wrath of gods and men both. No lord would, or so Jon had always believed. He watched Catelyn. She smiled when she was meant to, nodded at toasts, leaned to speak to Robb now and then. But her eyes were not on the minstrels or the food. They roved the hall with a soldier's wariness. He saw her gaze linger on the unseen alcoves above the doors, on the clustering of Frey men near certain points, on the way some of Walder's brood kept slipping out and returning, their faces a little more flushed each time. She senses it too, he thought. Not clearly, not enough to name, but enough to prick. As if she felt his attention, Catelyn's head turned slightly, her eyes lifting toward the gallery. From where he stood, Jon could not be sure she saw him. The distance and the smoke blurred everything. But for an instant, he fancied that her gaze snagged on the black figures above, on the pale flash of Ghost's fur. He raised a hand, small motion, half greeting, half vow. Down below, the song ended. Walder Frey clapped his hands together, the sound thin and papery. "Enough of that," he called. "You're putting the king to sleep. Give us something livelier. Something about lions and wolves, eh? Or maybe about heads on spikes. I always liked those." The musicians conferred, pale and sweating. One fiddler wiped his brow with a trembling hand. Ghost's growl, so long a low, constant rumble, deepened. Catelyn Stark had been watching men at feasts since she was a girl in Riverlands Hall, when her father had sat her beside him and told her which smiles were real and which were knives in waiting. She had watched bannermen drink too deep to mask their fear, watched knights boast of battles they had barely survived, watched the way men's hands strayed to their cups when someone spoke a hard truth. She had never watched anything quite like this. The Freys were too attentive. That was the heart of it. They laughed too loud at weak jests, filled cups too swiftly, agreed too readily with Robb's polite words. Their eyes did not match their mouths. Some darted to their lord at the high table, taking cue from his smirks and frowns. Others slid past Robb and Catelyn entirely, to the doors, the walls, the rafters. Lord Walder himself was drinking little. He pushed food about his trencher more than he ate it, his beakish nose twitching as if sniffing some private pleasure. Every now and then he caught Catelyn's eye and smiled, and the smile never reached those watery eyes. Edmure was too drunk to see any of it. Her brother had flushed to the roots of his ears, his hands moving animatedly as he told some story to his new bride. Rosalind Frey, poor girl, plucked up and offered like a sop to a hound, smiled and ducked her head and tried not to flinch when the hall's noise surged. Robb drank, but not so deeply as some. Exhaustion hung from him like a cloak, weighing his shoulders. Yet when he laughed, it was real enough. When he looked at Jane, there was something soft in his eyes that made Catelyn's throat ache. It was the look Ned had given her, seldom but unmistakable, in their early years, when they had still been strangers learning to be partners. She wanted to be glad for him, to take this as a sign that not all was bitter. But her unease had been growing like a splinter under the skin, and now it throbbed with every beat of the drum. She watched the musicians. The song they had chosen at Walder's request was an old one, something about hunting hounds and a girl in a wood. Yet at the last stanza, one of the fiddlers stumbled, his bow squeaking across the strings. The others shot him sharp looks, and for a moment their playing fell out of joint. Then they pushed into a new tune without pause. The new song made Catelyn's blood run cold. The Rains of Castamere. She had heard it at King's Landing, when the Lannisters wanted the world to remember what became of houses that defied them. She had heard it hummed under Cersei Lannister's breath, a mandolin's quiet strings picking it out in the background of a conversation. She had never thought to hear it here under Walder Frey's roof, with Stark and Tully banners hanging from his rafters. Her hand went to her cup and found it empty. She set it down with too much force, the dull thud lost in the rising swell of the music. Grey wind's growl cut through it like a saw. The dire wolf strained against his chain, claws scrabbling on the stone. Men nearby laughed nervously, then flinched when he snapped at one who ventured too close. Something is wrong. The thought came clear and hard as a bell. She looked along the walls and saw crossbowmen slipping into the alcoves, their weapons half concealed behind draped cloth. She saw a Frey by the door pull it almost closed, leaving only a narrow gap. She saw one of Roose Bolton's pale men leaning to murmur in his lord's ear, and Bolton's cold eyes slide briefly to Robb and back. Catelyn's breath caught. Her heart seemed to miss a beat, then lurch faster. Walder Frey slapped a hand on the table. "A song for the Lion's friends," he cried, rheumy eyes bright. "A Lannister tune for our northern king. He's made friends, hasn't he? Married some westerling chit from the west, they say. Lions and wolves all tangled together. Seems fitting." Robb's jaw tightened a fraction. "Our war is with the Lannisters, my lord, not in their bed," he said. "Oh, everything's in their bed," Walder cackled. "Wars, weddings, bastards. But your father should have taught you more about such things. Ned was always too solemn for his own good. Never learned when to bend, when to yield. All honor, that one." His pale gaze slid to Catelyn. "Like his lady, I suppose." Catelyn touched Robb's arm. "Something's amiss," she whispered. "Do you see? The doors, the men at the walls." He glanced around, frowning, but before he could speak, Walder was raising his cup. "A toast," the old man cried, "to the young wolf who came to my hall with his tail between his legs and his crown in his hands. To his sweet sister's husband. To all our fine new kin. May they live forever." His smile twisted on that last word, and for an instant Catelyn saw the naked malice beneath. She heard the clatter of the doors closing fully then, the iron bars slamming down home. Her hand went to her lap, to the knife she had hidden there under her skirts. Her fingers closed around the hilt. The music swelled. The Rains of Castamere rolled over them in a wave of doom. From above, the change in the hall's pulse was as clear as a shift in wind. Jon felt it in the way men's shoulders tightened, in the way some laughter abruptly died, in the subtle edging of Frey guards toward better vantage points. The tune, those ominous, descending notes of the Rains of Castamere, seemed to carry a message in its very bones. Power, ruthlessness, a promise that no one defied such men and lived. Ghost's growl broke into a series of sharp, warning barks. The sound shocked PYP and Gren into stillness. Below, heads turned toward the gallery, frowns knitting. "Something's wrong," PYP whispered needlessly. Jon's hands were already moving. He took in the space of a breath, the positions of his men, the nearest doors, the clusters of armed Freys. Crossbowmen were sliding into the rafters above opposite walls, their bodies half concealed by banners bearing the twin towers. A man near the musicians fumbled with a string, not a lute's but a bow's. The doors at either end of the hall thudded as heavy bars were dropped into place. "Draw," Jon said quietly. Gren's hand fell to his sword. PYP loosened his dagger as Dolorous Ed pulled a short spear from where it rested against the gallery rail. Ghost moved to the lip of the gallery walkway, muscles coiled. From the high table, Catelyn Stark's head jerked up. Her gaze snapped to the nearest door, then tracked along the wall to Roose Bolton, seated in a place of honor among the northern lords. Bolton's pale eyes were half-lidded, his mouth a thin line. His hand, for the first time that night, rested lightly on the pommel of his sword. Her eyes moved on, climbing the hall's length, following some instinct or perhaps the simple path of Ghost's barking. They reached the gallery. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, time narrowed to that single thread. Jon saw shock, recognition, and a fierce, wild hope flash across Catelyn's face. He saw the knife in her hand, half drawn from the folds of her skirt. He saw in the tightening of her jaw that she had seen what he had seen, that the hall was a snare being pulled tight. He nodded once. Not a bow, not a greeting, but an acknowledgement. Promise. Catelyn's lips moved. He could not hear the words over the music, but he thought he knew what they were. Do something. Walder Frey rose slowly, leaning on his cane as if the effort pained him. The music fell to a softer strain, the fiddles drawing out the notes like tendons. Men quieted, heads turning toward their host. "My lords, my ladies," Walder said, his voice thin but carrying. "You've eaten my bread, drunk my wine, and I've given my girls to warm your beds. The least you can do is listen when I've something to say." Jon's hand closed on Longclaw's hilt. Ghost's bark rose to a snarl, echoing around the rafters. Crossbow strings were drawn back in the shadows above. Walder Frey drew in a breath to speak, the corners of his mouth curling around some final, poisonous jest. Jon moved before the words could take shape. "Down!" he bellowed, the shout cutting through music, laughter, and the first sharp twang of bowstrings all at once. He vaulted the gallery rail. For a heartbeat he hung in smoke and torchlight, the hall yawning beneath him, 100 faces tipping back in shock. Then gravity took him. He fell with Longclaw already in his hand and Ghost launching after him in a blur of white. The first volley of quarrels hissed through the air as he dropped. Bolts streaked from the shadowed rafters, black strokes against the fire-lit gloom. Many flew true, too true, toward the high table and the drunken press of northern lords. But Jon's roar and Ghost's sudden barking had tugged the thread of the hall's attention askew. Men flinched, half rising, overturning benches and platters without knowing why. Shields scraped as instincts older than guessed right answered danger. Arrows shattered on upflung boards, clanged from hastily raised helmets, punched into dishes and jugs instead of hearts. Not all were thwarted. A Karstark man jerked like a puppet and toppled backward, a quarrel jutting from his throat. Another lordling slumped across the table, wine and blood spilling together. Jon hit the table in a crash of wood and crockery. Pain jolted up his legs, but he rolled with the impact, shoulder-driving a Frey who had been lunging toward Robb with a dagger in hand. Longclaw rose and fell in a single vicious arc, steel bit through mail and bone as if they were no more than cloth. The dagger clattered away along with 2 fingers. The man sagged bonelessly, throat opening in a dark spray. Ghost landed beside him, claws gouging the tabletop, white fur already spattered red from the first crossbowman he had reached. The dire wolf sprang from the wreckage with a snarl, jaws closing around the face of a second Frey scrambling for his sword. The man's scream ended in a bubbling gurgle as Ghost bore him down among the ruins of the feast. For an instant, the entire hall hung between 2 worlds. Guessed right, some fragment of every mind whispered. Bread and salt. No blood here. No blood. "Kill the wolves!" A Frey shrieked from near the far door. "Kill the Starks. Now!" The illusion shattered like thin ice. More bolts flew. The musicians flung away their instruments and clawed at knives hidden under benches. Frey men who had been lounging against walls sprang forward with swords already half drawn. A northern bannerman, Catelyn, barely knew pitched sideways from his seat, a coral sprouting from his eye. "Mother!" Robb shouted, shoving aside his chair as it toppled. A bolt shattered his goblet instead, exploding wine across his chest in a crimson sheet. Catelyn had already moved. Jon's shout had ripped the fog from her mind. She kicked her chair straight backward, sending it crashing into the man behind, and snatched the knife from her lap. Walder Frey's half-witted grandson, Jinglebell with his ridiculous cap of bells, had lurched to his feet in confusion, mouth open. Catelyn seized him from behind, dragging him hard against her, pressing the blade to the sagging skin beneath his jaw. "Hold!" she screamed, her voice cutting across the din like a whip crack. "Hold, or I'll slit his throat." For a heartbeat, There was a ragged stillness. Even some bowmen hesitated, their sights wavering. The Rains of Castamere sawed on regardless, fingers moving on strings out of sheer habit. Walder Frey turned toward her. His expression was not that of a man whose blood was at hazard. It was that of a man watching mummers. "Go on, then," he said softly, voice carrying far too well. "He's never been worth much to me," and he raised his hand. Up on the gallery, PYP screamed as a bolt punched high into his chest. His body twisted, tangled in the rail, and he toppled, spinning, to crash amid Frey men surging toward the high table. Gren bellowed in fury and hurled his spear like a javelin. It took a crossbowman clean through the throat, pinning him to the smoky rafters. Another quarrel chewed splinters an inch from Gren's ear. Dolorous Ed rammed the butt of his short spear into the gut of the first man scrambling up the gallery ladder. "I knew it'd be a wedding that killed me," Ed muttered. "Never trusted dancing." In the press below, Jon saw Robb struggling to his feet, saw Roose Bolton rising with serpent-smooth grace a few places down the table, saw Catelyn's hand clenching tighter on her hostage as Walder's fingers twitched. From the rafters, more bowstrings creaked, drawing back. There was no time for thought, only for motion. The chain that held Grey Wind was sunk deep into the stone, the links thick as a man's thumb. It had been forged to hold a beast, not a storm. The dire wolf had endured it only because Robb's hand on his neck and his master's calm had told him this was what the pack required. But when the first quarrels shrieked through the hall, when meat and men both began to scream, something in him snapped. He lunged. Iron bit into his neck as the chain went taut, muscles corded, paws skidding on stone. For an instant it held. Then the staple ripped out of the wall with a shriek like rending bone, chips of stone spraying the nearest Frey. Grey Wind hit the closest man with all the force of his rage. The fellow had just enough time to turn, eyes huge, before jaws closed around half his chest. Ribs crunched. The man's scream sprayed blood across the rushes. Men who had been jeering and tossing bones scrambled now, tripping over benches in their haste to get away. One snatched a spear from the wall and thrust blindly. Grey Wind twisted, the iron point grazing his flank, then turned and took the man's arm off at the elbow. The severed limb flew, fingers still clutching the shaft. "Seven hells?" Someone breathed, voice thin with terror. "The wolf! To Robb!" Jon roared, cutting down another Frey who tried to dart between him and the high table. Longclaw slid through the man's mail like butter, opening him from hip to shoulder. Jon shoved the falling body aside, dragging an overturned bench into place as crude cover. "Shields!" Robb shook his head like a dog emerging from water. Wine and blood stained his doublet. The shattered goblet lay at his feet, stem snapped. He snatched up his sword, steel glinting in the ruddy light. "Stark men to me!" he shouted, voice hoarse but carrying. "They mean to butcher us. Wolves!" Catelyn felt Jingle Bell shudder in her grip, the fool's bells chiming madly. Her knife dug deeper into the loose flesh of his throat, a bright bead of blood welling. "Stop this!" she cried at Walder. "You've broken guest right. Call off your killers, or I swear by every god that ever watched your bridge, I will cut him open here and now." Walder's pale eyes slid to her. For a heartbeat, she saw contempt as naked as his treachery. "I told you," he said, almost bored. "He's never been worth much," and he flicked his fingers. A fresh storm of bolts came hissing from the rafters. Gren cursed and ducked behind the gallery rail as shafts chewed the timber to splinters. One punched through his sleeve and tore a bloody furrow along his arm. PYP lay twisted on the hall floor below, eyes glassy, a dark bloom across his chest. Dolorous Ed jammed his spear down through the ladder rungs, knocking another Frey climber back into his fellows. "Always knew I'd end in some bugger's hall," he said through clenched teeth. "Didn't think it'd be this ugly." Below, men answered Jon's call. The North had not followed Robb Stark this far to die quietly with meat still between their teeth. Umber, Blackwood, Glover, Bracken. Grizzled veterans and green boys both lurched to their feet, yanking shields from pegs, flipping tables onto their sides. The neat lines of Frey hospitality dissolved into a snarling scrum as northern steel met treacherous blades. Jon shoved forward, putting himself between Robb and the press. Longclaw, a dark, deadly arc ghost, worked at his side, darting in low under men's guards, hamstringing those who tried to circle behind. Blood slicked the rushes, turning every step into a risk. Roose Bolton at last rose fully, pale eyes surveying the chaos with the calm of a man watching a harvest. His hand closed around his sword hilt, drawing it with a smooth hiss. Jon saw him move and shifted to meet him. Bolton stepped into the path between Robb and the hall, blade angling toward the gap beneath the king's lifted shield. "The Lannisters send their regards," he murmured, the words almost gentle as his sword drove in. Longclaw met the thrust with a ringing crash. The force of the parry twisted Bolton's blade aside. Instead of sliding between Robb's ribs into his heart, the point scored a furrow along his mail-clad side. Robb gasped, half from pain, half from shock, as blood blossomed hot and sticky under his arm. Bolton's head turned, eyes meeting Jon's over locked steel. "You break your vows easily, Snow," he observed, as if commenting on the weather. "If my vows mean letting you stick a knife in my brother's back, to hell with them," Jon snarled. They broke apart and came together again. Bolton's sword work was maddeningly economical. No wasted motion, each stroke aimed for joints and gaps. Jon's style was rougher, born of Winterfell's practice yard and honed beyond the wall against foes who did not know the dance at all. Longclaw whirled, parried, bit. "You think saving him here will change anything?" Bolton asked between blows. "Too many wheels already turning. One butchered king is as good as another." "I'm not here for wheels," Jon grated, forcing him back a step. "I'm here for him." Bolton's pale mouth twitched. "Sentiment. How very Stark of you." His boot shot out, heel angling for Jon's knee. Ghost slammed into Bolton's shins at the last instant, snarling, the blow glancing aside. Jon's leg screamed with bruised pain instead of snapping. Bolton stumbled just for a heartbeat, weight shifting wrong. Jon struck. Longclaw bit deep into Bolton's hip where plate thinned to mail. Blood welled, dark and sudden. Bolton hissed, not with panic, but annoyance. Twisting away, tearing himself off the blade at the cost of more torn flesh. His sword came up in a defensive sweep, keeping Jon from following with a killing blow. "You'll regret that," Bolton said softly. A Frey hurled himself bodily between them, buying his lord a moment to retreat. Jon cut the man down in disgust, but when the body slid from Longclaw, Bolton had already melted into the milling press, white cloak lost. Among bestained Frey gray, coward, Jon thought savagely. Snake? Robb's expression seemed to agree as he braced himself, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. "I should have seen," he gasped. "Live first," Jon said, grabbing his good arm and dragging him toward the nearest overturned table. "Curse yourself later." Catelyn's grip on Jingle Bell slipped as the world narrowed to steel and blood. The fool thrashed in panic, bells chiming madly, his bulk throwing her off balance when a Frey lunged across the table. She slashed at the attacker, her knife scoring his cheek, but his sheer weight slammed her sideways. Jingle Bell tumbled from her grasp, crashing to the floor in a tangle of limbs and jingling tin. A mailed hand clamped around her wrist. "Lady Stark," a Frey son sneered, wrenching her knife away. "My father sends his." Longclaw sheared through his forearm at the elbow. Steel, bone, and sinew parted in one savage stroke. The man's hand, and the knife it held, fell amidst the spilled trenchers. He screamed, blood pumping through the sudden fountain of stump. Catelyn stared up at Jon, chest heaving, hair tumbling loose around her face. For a moment there was nothing in her eyes but recognition and disbelief. "Jon," she breathed. "Mother," he said, breath ragged, and there was no time for more. Walder Frey, seeing his perfect slaughter souring into hard, ugly work, shrieked something unintelligible and flung his cup at them. The wine pattered across the table like blood. The old man shoved his own descendants aside as he hobbled backward, cane clacking, searching for safety behind a wall of suns. "Take them," he screeched. "Take their heads. Sound the horns. Close the—" A thunderous crash from the far doors drowned him out. The heavy timbers shuddered under a massive impact. Once, twice. On the third, they burst inward in a storm of splinters and iron shards, slamming back against the stone. The sudden gale of cold night air swept smoke and scent through the hall. Men outlined in torchlight poured through the breach. Ser Brynden Tully, the Blackfish of Riverrun, led the charge, his trout and Tully cloak torn, sword already dark to the hilt. Behind him surged men who had not been inside the hall when the killing started. Those tending horses, walking the walls, taking their ease by outer fires. They had heard the screams and moved, steel drawn, before any Frey could close them out. "To the king!" Brynden roared. Riverrun, Winterfell, the nearest Freys, stunned by the explosion of door and men both, reeled under the onslaught. A man dragging a crossbow toward a new vantage point took Brynden's blade through his chest. Another had time only to lift his hands before an axe from a Glover soldier split his skull. The neat Frey lines dissolved into knots of desperate resistance. Grey Wind saw the open doors and hurled himself toward them, scattering men who tried to bar his path. He leapt an overturned table in a single bound, landing amid the newcomers with a spray of blood and foam. Brynden's hand brushed his slick fur without thinking. "Good lad," he grunted. "Let's show these bridge rats what a flood looks like." In the press near the high table, Jon seized the chance. "ROBB!" he shouted in the din, voice hoarse Ned to a raw edge. "To the doors! Shield wall! We cut out now or drown here!" Robb blinked, forcing his focus outward through pain and staggered senses. Through the torn smoke, he saw his uncle's standard, a black fish on red and blue, surging at the far end of the hall. He saw northern men rallying to it, weapons raised. "To the Blackfish!" Robb yelled, forcing strength into his throat. "Stark men on me. Umber, Mormont, with me." Catelyn's hand closed on his arm. "Sansa," she gasped. "Arya, we can't leave them." "Arya is not here," Jon said, parrying a slash and smashing his pommel into the nose behind it. Bone crunched. "If she were, the Hound who has her would not walk her into a hall full of knives. He's too wary." Her eyes flared. "You know, later," Jon snapped. "If we don't move now, there will be no later for any of us." Walder Frey shrieked fresh orders, but the sound was thin against the rising roar. His sons tried to drag benches across the gap to block the Blackfish's advance. Men tripped over them and were trampled instead. Grey Wind crashed into a knot of archers who had been lining up a fresh shot at Robb. Men flew like ninepins, one tumbling screaming into the open fire pit, the stink of searing flesh adding to the hall's reek. Someone, Jon never knew who, took up his earlier cry and turned it into a rhythm. "To the king!" the man bawled. "To the king!" Men answered, stumbling toward Robb, forming instinctive clumps of shields. Umber and Blackwood, Glover and Karstark survivors. Whoever had a board of wood or a scrap of painted steel raised it, overlapping edges, turning scattered defense into a crude wall. "Lock shields!" Jon shouted, shoving an overturned table into the line to thicken it. "Tight! You've marched behind him for leagues. You can damned well stand beside him for 10 more steps." Shields thudded together, spears and swords thrust between the gaps. The Freys, for all their treachery, had not drunk in half as much discipline as wine. They hurled themselves at the rising wall and broke their own momentum on it, stabbing and hacking over the top only to find northerners driving steel into their bellies from behind stout oak. Behind the forming wall, Catelyn ducked under Robb's good arm, bracing his weight. He gritted his teeth against a groan, sweat standing out on his brow. Jon took the other side, ghost weaving at their feet, snarling at any Frey foolish enough to press too close. "Move!" Jon barked. "Step! Step! Keep the line!" The shield wall began to advance, inch by bloodied inch, toward the splintered doors where Bryndon's men held back fresh Frey attempts to seal the breach. Men stumbled over corpses and broken benches, but the line did not break. Up in his high seat, Walder Frey watched, face mottled. He had wanted a song, a neat, finished slaughter. Instead, he had a brawl and wolves running through his hall. His jaw clenched so tight a vein throbbed in his temple. He gestured sharply to a runner and hissed into the man's ear. "If they get off my bridge," he spat, "they don't leave my land. Signal the men at the outer gate. Let them think the yard is escape. Then close the jaws." The courtyard beyond the hall was a maelstrom of torchlight and confusion. Arya Stark had never been so close to home and so far from safety. She crouched in the shadow of a hay cart, breathing hard through her teeth as the hall doors shuddered under the first pounding from within. Beside her, Sandor Clegane squinted toward the gatehouse, hand tight on his sword hilt. "Too quiet," he muttered, "for a feast, for Freys." Then the doors exploded outward, wood splintered in a spray of shards and iron. Men spilled out in a wave, some staggering, some dragging others, some backing with shields aloft. Smoke and the stink of blood rolled with them, swallowing the cool night air. Gray wind burst through first, a streak of gray fur and red fangs. Arrows hissed down from the walls, clattering on stone. One nicked the direwolf's flank. He barely flinched, snapping at a guard who had been too slow to raise his spear. The man went down screaming, throat a torn ruin. Behind the wolf came northern men, faces wild, shields dented, blades wet. At their heart Arya saw him, taller than she remembered, crown askew, auburn hair dark with sweat and soot. Robb. Her breath left her in a ragged gasp. For a heartbeat all she saw was that familiar tilt of his head, the set of his shoulders that was both her father's and his own. Then the courtyard's chaos rushed back in. Beside Robb rode a grim figure in black, Longclaw carving space around him. A white wolf flickered at his heel, bloody muzzle and red eyes. "Jon." Arya surged to her feet, heart thundering against her ribs. Sandor's hand clamped down on her collar and yanked her back into shadow. "Not yet, wolf girl," he snarled. "You run out there squealing. You'll take an arrow in the eye before he even knows you're breathing." "They're killing them," Arya hissed. Already, Frey men were pouring from side doors and stairways, howling, swords raised. Archers along the curtain wall loosed shaft after shaft into the teeming yard. "I have to. You have to live," the Hound snapped. "You want to reach them. You do it when they're not standing under a God's damned rain of iron." In the yard, Jon's voice cut through the cacophony. "Shields! Form in the yard! Get clear of the doors!" The crude wall that had punched its way through the hall reformed, turning to face outward. Shields locked. Northern men braced as fresh Frey charges crashed in. Arrows hammered into the boards, thudded into shoulders and thighs and backs. Men grunted, staggered, stepped up to fill gaps when others fell. "Gate!" someone howled. "They're dropping the bloody gate." Arya craned her neck. At the far end of the yard, beyond the press of bodies, she glimpsed the great iron portcullis shuddering as chains clanked. Men on the winch platform strained, hauling on ropes with frantic urgency. If the portcullis came down, the foes Walder had hoped to trap in the hall would instead be sealed in the castle's stone belly. "Of course," Sandor muttered. "Old Weasel always liked his cages." Gray wind hurled himself at a knot of Freys rushing to bolster the chain haulers. He hit them like a boulder, knocking men from their feet, jaws snapping on limbs and throats. Ghost darted at his flank, smaller but faster, seizing an exposed wrist, dragging its owner away from the winch lever. "Wedge!" Jon shouted. "On the king! We drive for the gate!" Robb raised his sword, face white with blood loss, eyes blazing. "To me!" he cried. "Umber Mormont! Form the point!" The shield wall bent, reshaping itself into a crude triangle aimed at the descending iron. The biggest men, Umbers, Mormonts, bear-like figures in dented mail, took their place at the tip. Grey Wind and Ghost slotted themselves into the narrow gap ahead of them, twin spears of fur and fury. "On my mark," Robb rasped. "We do not stop. Anyone who falls is left. We mourn them later. Now!" The wedge surged forward. Frey men who had poured from side doors howling found themselves smashed back, battered aside by the weight of wood, steel, and desperate northern will. The wedge moved like a single, stubborn creature, its shield faces bristling with arrows, its edges stabbing out with spears and swords. "Move!" Jon snarled through gritted teeth. "Step! Step! Don't you dare stop!" Men slipped on blood-slicked cobbles, were dragged back into place by comrades before they could fall. A Frey leapt at the wolves, spear stabbing. Grey Wind took the shaft in his shoulder with a grunt, snapped the wood, and closed his jaws on the man's face. Ghost slid under another blade and took the hamstring behind it. Arrows rained. A Mormont at the wedge's flank jerked as a shaft punched through his throat. He fell, but the shield he bore did not, snatched up by the man behind without breaking stride. Another took an arrow in the arm and snarled, snapping off the protruding length and slamming his board back into place. The portcullis ground lower, iron teeth biting at empty air. A Glover man broke from the wedge just enough to hurl an axe. It spun end over end and bit into one of the main chains with a jarring clang. The chain snapped. The portcullis lurched, sagging drunkenly to one side. There was now a gap, crooked and mean, iron fangs angling dangerously, but a gap all the same. "Through there," Gren panted behind Jon. "That'll cut a man in half." "Then don't be half a man," Jon growled. "Gren, to the stables. We need horses, anything with 4 legs. Run." Gren balked for half a heartbeat. "You?" "I'll be here," Jon said. "Go." Dolorous Ed sighed as if handed a shovel and told to start his own grave. "I always knew I'd die trampled in some lord's yard," he muttered as he turned to sprint. "Didn't think I'd have to fetch the horses first." He and Gren vanished into the smoky dark toward the stable doors. The wedge hit the crooked gap a breath later. Grey Wind forced his bulk under, iron teeth scraping fur. Ghost slipped in his wake, pale shadow. Behind them Robb and Jon ducked low, shields raised, the sharp kiss of rusted iron scoring along their backs as they squeezed through. "Now," Sandor said, hauling Arya up by the scruff. "This is your moment, wolf girl. Stay low. If you stand up, you're meat." Heart hammering, she darted from the cart's shadow, into the chaos, toward the jagged mouth of the gate and the only path that led away from this butcher's yard. Beyond the half-fallen portcullis, the bridge stretched away like a narrow road into a nightmare. The night wind came up from the river cold and damp, tugging at cloaks, tasting of stone and old water. Torches along the parapets cast wavering cones of light on slick flagstones. At the far end, Frey men scrambled like ants, dragging barrels and carts into a makeshift barricade, shouting orders at one another, shoving in their haste. Grey Wind tore past the first few in a blur, hurling one screaming man over the parapet. His body pinwheeled into the black water below with a splash that was swallowed instantly by the river. Ghost darted under a hastily raised spear, teeth fastening on the wielder's calf and yanking him to his knees. Steel clanged on stone as weapons fell from suddenly nerveless fingers. Jon and Robb burst onto the bridge behind them, shields up, swords already swinging. The wedge of northern soldiers funneled through the crooked gap 1 or 2 at a time, every man who emerged having to choose. Forward into the teeth of Frey resistance, or back into the yard where more Freys were rallying. "Forward," Robb rasped. "To the tower. Drive them into the water." He spurred his horse, ignoring the shriek of torn flesh from his wounded side as the beast surged. Jon's mount lunged alongside, hooves ringing on stone. Men shouted, some in challenge, some in fear. The narrowness of the bridge that had once made the twins so secure now worked against its masters. They could not bring all their numbers to bear at once. The front rank of Freys braced themselves behind their piled barrels and crates. The captain raised his sword. "Hold!" he yelled. "Hold, you craven dogs! 2 wolves and a boy king don't." Grey wind hit the barricade like a storm-tossed log. With splintered, men went down beneath his weight, screams cut short by tearing teeth. Ghost shot passed in the confusion, seizing the captain's sword arm. Bones snapped loud as a breaking branch. The sword clattered off into the dark. "I think you'll find one wolf is enough," Jon muttered, leaning from his saddle to hack down at a man trying to hamstring Robb's horse. The horse shied, eyes rolling. Robb clung on grimly. Blood from his side had soaked his doublet and was beginning to slick his gloved hand on the reins. "Still with me," Jon called over the crash and scream. "Until it ends," Robb gritted. Behind them, more of their riders poured through the crooked gate. Gren and Dolorous Ed reappeared at the rear of the press leading half-saddled, half-wild mounts, cursing and coaxing in equal measure. "Got you your gods' cursed horses," Ed panted. "Every one of them's got more sense than we do. They want to run the other way. Then point them where the Freys aren't," Jon said. "Once we're through that mess," he slashed Longclaw toward the far end barricade. "You ride. Anyone can't sit a saddle. Double them up or leave them. No good manning a rear guard if there's no one left to guard." Catelyn was hoisted astride a horse by 3 pairs of hands, one of them Bryndon's. Jane Westerling clung on behind her, arms tight around Catelyn's waist, face chalk white. "I can ride alone," Jane protested in a small voice. "You can cling and keep your tongue," Catelyn said, harsher than she meant. "We did not live through that hall, so you can fall under some Frey's hooves in the yard." Arya hurtled through the portcullis gap on foot, stones scraping her back, nearly sprawling. For a moment she lay flat on the bridge, staring up at torches on the towers, lungs burning. Then Sandor's boot nudged her ribs. "Up," he growled. "You're not rat-catching in the Red Keep anymore. Move." He hauled her to a horse's side and all but threw her into the saddle before swinging up behind. Arya grabbed at the mane, clinging as the animal danced sideways, spooked by the noise and blood. Ahead, Robb and Jon forced a narrow breach through the Frey blockade. The young king's sword work had grown sloppier as blood loss and pain gnawed at him, but fury and stubborn pride filled some of the gap. He hacked through a spear shaft, then slammed his shield into its wielder, sending the man flying back into the press. "Clear me space," he shouted. "Grey wind." The dire wolf answered his name with a guttural snarl, leaping onto a crate and from there into the midst of the defenders. Men tumbled like ninepins. Ghost darted in his wake, seizing an exposed thigh, dragging its owner down. The Frey line buckled. "Through," Jon shouted. "Once you're clear of the tower, you don't look back." They burst past the last ragged fringe of the barricade onto the wider stone before the far side gate. Torches flared along the tower walls, blinding after the gloom of the bridge. Frey men scattered or tried to make a stand, only to be ridden down or ripped apart by wolves. Beyond the tower, the road sloped away into the night, curving between dark fields toward the deeper black of distant trees. Behind, the bridge was already beginning to clog with more enemies as Freys rallied from the yard. Ahead lay only uncertainty. "Brynden," Robb called, dragging his horse around, breath ragged. "Gather whoever can ride and push. Mother, Jane, the wounded, go with him. I'll hold here with Jon and whoever won't leave me." Catelyn turned in her saddle, horror flaring. "You are not staying to play the hero on some bridge, Robb Stark," she snapped. "Not while you can sit that horse. We did not claw you from that hall to throw you into the river." Bryndon's jaw clenched. "She's right," he said curtly. "Your men have seen you bleed enough for one night. They need you riding with them, not dying in some phrase song. You want a rearguard, you've got old Tully blood for that." Robb opened his mouth, closed it again, choking on pride and duty both. He looked at Jon. "You've a wall of your own to think of," he said roughly. "You don't owe me this." Jon glanced back toward the castle, where the hall roof still belched smoke and shouts echoed faintly. "If they close that gate behind us, the twins become a tomb," he said. "For you, for the men we leave. I'll see you clear of it." A grim smile touched his mouth. "After that, The gods and your uncle can argue over who holds the tail. Robb nodded once. Then ride with me as far as the trees, he said. After that, we all owe things we can't yet pay. He raised his sword, pain blanching his face. To horse, he shouted. Ride. And the broken, bloodied remnant of the young wolf's host thundered down the slope away from the twins, hooves striking sparks from stone, wolves racing at their flanks. They rode like hunted things. The night swallowed their passage, hoofbeats drumming a frantic rhythm over stone and then rutted earth. Behind them, the twins receded into a smear of torchlight and smoke. Ahead, fields rolled away in dark waves, broken by copses of trees and low stone walls. The river's murmur kept pace at their flank for a time before veering off into the black. Arya clung to the horse's mane, fingers aching. Sandor's bulk behind her was a solid, unwelcome anchor, his arm a band of iron locked around her to keep her from sliding off every time the animal stumbled. Keep your head down, he barked once as an arrow whistled somewhere off to their right, unseen in the dark. You've got a pretty small one. No sense making it easier. Are they following? She shouted over the wind and thunder of hooves. Of course they're bloody following, Sandor snapped. But not all of them, and not close enough yet. Old Walder's got a mess to clean up before he starts sending riders too far. For the moment, we've got more fear on our side than they do. Ahead, Grey Wind and Ghost ran at either flank of Robb's horse, long legs eating the distance. Jon rode close, black cloak snapping behind him. Every now and then he turned in the saddle to scan the darkness behind, searching for torches, for dust, for the glint of pursuit. Catelyn's horse labored, nostrils flaring. She could hear the animal's breaths rattling. Jane's arms were tight around her waist. Every jolt pulled a small gasp from the girl. Hold on, Catelyn murmured, as much to herself as to her. Just a little farther. At last Brynden raised a hand and hauled his own mount up, sucking in air between his teeth. We'll kill them if we keep this pace, he called. Horses and men both. Here. They had reached a patch of scrubby woodland where twisted oaks and thorn bushes crowded close enough to offer some screen. Brynden gestured sharply. In. Off the road. No fires yet. We see who we've kept and who we've lost. Reluctance rippled through the survivors, but the wisdom of it was plain. One by one, they peeled off the faint track into the trees, hooves muffled by leaf litter and damp earth. The wolves disappeared into shadow, outlines flickering in and out of sight between trunks. Jon drew up near the edge of the copse, letting his horse blow. Ghost materialized beside him, chest heaving, fur clotted with other men's blood. Jon leaned down, fingers digging into the direwolf's scruff. Well done, he said softly. You saved more lives than any banner tonight. Ghost huffed, warm breath ghosting over Jon's hand, then turned his head north, nose testing the air. Robb slid from his saddle with Jon and Brynden's help and nearly went to his knees as his wounded side lit with fire. He swallowed a cry, jaw clenched. Sit, Catelyn ordered, her voice leaving no room for argument. If you topple, we'll drop you anyway. Better you fall where the ground is soft. He sank onto a blanket spread hastily over roots, breath coming in ragged pulls. The wound along his ribs had reopened. Fresh red seeped through the bandages and his torn doublet. How many? He demanded, even as Jane and a grim-faced Mormont woman bent over his side with needle and thread. 43 that can still lift a sword, Jon said after a while, returning from his circuit of the huddled shapes. Another dozen wounded so badly they'll slow us if they come, die for certain if they stay. We left too many in that yard and on that bridge. Robb closed his eyes briefly. Names flickered through his mind. Umber and Karstark men, Blackwoods and Brackens, faces he had known since Winterfell's yard and others he had only learned on this campaign. Roose? He asked. Gone, Jon answered, melted into the confusion like the snake he is. I cut him. Not deeply enough. Catelyn's mouth was a tight line. He will tell the Lannisters you are dead, she said. He'll stand beside that old spider on the bridge and boast of a clean slaughter. Let him, Brynden said, leaning against a tree, drawing in slow breaths. A dead king moves freer than a living one. They think this done, they look outward. They think they've missed. They hunt every bush between here and the Dreadfort. Where do we move, then? Jane asked quietly, hands still slick with Robb's blood. We cannot go back to Riverrun. The Lannisters will be there. The Freys own every crossing. Robb's gaze drifted to the crude map Brynden was scratching in the dirt with a stick. Rivers and roads, towers and towns reduced to lines and circles. His fingers tightened on the handle of his sword where it lay beside him. North, he said at last. Home. We cannot ride straight up the King's Road with this, Brynden pointed out. Not with Frey riders scouring the countryside once they finish butchering our camp. Not the King's Road, Jon said. He knelt beside the map and drew his own smear of line where the land narrowed and broke into bog and mire. The neck, Greywater Watch. Howland Reed, Brynden grunted. Your father's old shadow. A reed in the marsh that never quite broke. Catelyn looked from one to the other, puzzled. He would help us? He saved my father's life once, Robb said, and held his secrets. If he still lives and hears the North calls, he'll hide us if he can. Lannister riders prefer dry ground beneath their boots. Let them chase ghosts on the roads while we sink into the bog. Jon's mouth tightened. It puts me further from the wall. Do you regret it? Catelyn asked softly. Coming? He thought of the haul of crossbow bolts, of Longclaw turning a traitor's sword aside, of Robb's blood on the floor and on his own gloves. If I had stayed on the wall tonight, he said slowly, you would be dead at a bridge and the North would have no king at all. I'm sworn to guard the realms of men. Sometimes that means choosing which fire to stamp out first. Catelyn held his gaze for a long mom, and something old and brittle in her seemed to crack and fall away. You saved my son, she said. Whatever I thought of you, whatever wrongs I imagined, tonight you stood between his heart and a traitor's steel. For that, Jon Snow, I will call you son as well if you'll have it. The words struck him harder than any blow he'd taken in the hall. I don't know what I can have, he said roughly. I have a cloak that says I belong to the wall, and a name that says I don't belong to any house. But I know what I can do. He looked north, where the trees thickened, the ground already growing damper. I can see him as far as Greywater. After that, the gods and the crows and old maesters can argue which oath I broke worst. Ghost huffed softly at his side, as if in approval. Grey Wind lifted his head where he lay a little apart, bandaged flank rising and falling, and stared into the dark with eyes that seemed to see more than trees. Far away, faint through the damp night, a horn blew from the direction of the twins. The sound was thin and angry. They've finished with the dead, Brynden said. Now they'll begin looking for the living. Then we move at first light, Robb said. He grimaced as the needle bit his skin afresh, but his voice steadied. Into the bog. Let them chase ghosts on their tidy roads. We'll be shadows in the reeds. Dawn came grudging and gray, as if the sun itself were ashamed to look on Walder Frey's work. Mist lay low over the fields, clinging to the hollows and drifting between the trees. It made the world smaller, muffling sound and swallowing distance. Jon could not see the twins from where they had camped, but he could feel them like a toothache in the bones of the land. The camp stirred in weary silence. Men rose with groans, faces hollowed by shock and the brittle relief of survival. Horses snorted and stamped, breath smoking as they were saddled. Armor creaked as straps were tightened. Cloth rustled as men bound fresh bandages or checked those applied by moonlight. Robb needed 2 men to get him to his feet. Pride made him try to rise on his own. Pain and blood loss made a mockery of the attempt. Brynden and Jon took an arm each and hauled him upright. He swayed, then steadied, jaw clenched. I can ride, he said before anyone could argue. You can sit a horse, Catelyn corrected. Whether you can ride without tearing yourself open again is another matter. You will let others bear the heaviest burdens today. I'm their king, he muttered. You're their symbol, Brynden said. Kings die in halls. Symbols linger. You fall from that saddle in some bog hole and drown. This all ends here. Sit. Let us do the ugly work. Robb's mouth twisted, but he let them help him into the saddle. Jane fussed at his side until Catelyn gently but firmly pulled her back. Enough, Catelyn said. He's not made of glass. If he breaks, it will not be for one of you wringing your hands. Jane swallowed hard and nodded, eyes reddened but clearer than they had been in the night. On the edge of the scrub, Jon knelt in the damp earth, drawing again the crude map from the night before. A smear for the Green Fork here, a jagged line for the King's Road there. Above it he traced a broad, shaded band where the land narrowed and the ground turned treacherous. The neck, he said, bog and mire and trees close enough to whisper to each other. We keep off the main tracks, use deer paths and hunters' trails when we find them, our own sense when we don't. Reed's folk know that land like we know Winterfell's gods would. If we can get inside their mists, they can hide us as well as any castle. And if they don't want to? A Glover man asked, voice hoarse. What if this Reed decides one king's as much trouble as another? Then we'll be no worse off than we are now, Brynden said. Hunted on open ground with nowhere to vanish. I've met Howland Reed. He won't turn his back on Ned Stark's son if he can help it. Catelyn glanced sidelong at Jon. On either of them, she said quietly. Jon's throat tightened. He pushed the feeling aside and rose. Keep the column long and thin, he said. We move in 2s and 3s under cover when we can. No more great banners. No horns. We look like a broken band of hedge knights and farmers fleeing the wars. Nothing more. You'll never hide Grey Wind, the Mormont woman observed. Nor that. She nodded at Ghost, whose red eyes gleamed from the mist like banked coals. No, Jon agreed. But Freys and Lannisters will be looking for direwolves running on roads beside marching columns. Not ghosts slipping through bog and bracken. Let them be the story grown larger than the truth. Robb watched him as he spoke, frowning slightly, as if seeing his bastard brother anew. You've been making plans since before you left the wall, he said. You came south expecting treachery. I came south expecting danger, Jon answered. Ghost knew. Aemon's words, your letter, the dreams. It all stank of something wrong. I didn't know what shape it would take until I saw the chains on Grey Wind and the crossbow slits in the rafters. Robb rubbed at his eyes with the heel of his hand briefly. If you hadn't... He trailed off, the shape of the hall full of corpses needing no words. We'd be dead, Brynden said bluntly. All of us. Frey gets his song. Bolton gets his new furs. Lannisters get their neat little tale for the court. A hard light shone in his eyes. Instead they get rumors, whispers, a story that the young wolf walked out of their trap alive. Catelyn looked north, where the mists thickened. If the gods have any justice, they will choke on it, she murmured. Jon swung into his saddle. Ghost loped beside his stirrup, pausing only to sniff at the track ahead. Grey Wind padded to Robb's other side, flanks still bandaged but step strong enough. Move out, Robb said, raising his voice just enough. Quietly, the small column wound into the morning fog, vanishing by degrees as if swallowed by some living thing. Behind them, their camp became a smear of trampled grass and scattered ashes. Ahead, the trees grew closer, the ground under hoof softer and more treacherous. After a time, the path they followed ceased to resemble any road at all. It was little more than a series of slightly drier hummocks between dark pools. Horses sank fetlocks deep into muck, snorting. Men cursed under their breath as boots filled with cold water. This is worse than the wall, Gren muttered to Dolorous Ed. At least there the ground stays put. At the wall, the ground tries to kill you by freezing you where you stand, Ed replied. Here it drags you down slow so you can think about it. I can't decide which is kinder. Jon let their muttering wash over him. His eyes were on Ghost, On the way, the direwolf paused now and then, testing scents, shifting direction by degrees. The further they went, the quieter the land became. Birdsong faded. Even the wind seemed to hesitate before passing through the reeds. "Feels like walking into a story," Arya said under her breath, riding a sway-backed horse that had seen better days. "The sort old Nan used to tell, where men went into the bog and never came out again." "Most stories like that are warnings, girl," Sandor grunted from his own saddle nearby. "I know, Arya," I said, "but some are about the ones who do come out. Different." Jon glanced back at her, at the fierce set of her jaw, at the streak of dried Frey blood across her cheek. Sansa was somewhere south in silk and fear. Bran and Rickon were gods knew where. Yet here was Arya, ghost of Winterfell in leathers and mud. "Stay close to Ghost," he told her. "If he growls, you listen. If he runs, you follow." She nodded, eyes bright. The mists thickened. Trees loomed, draped in moss and lichen. Water gurgled unseen. Every step took them further from roads and towers and closer to a place where the old god's reach felt nearer than that of any king. Somewhere in that gray, shifting world, Howland Reed was waiting. Or not. Either way, Jon thought they were past the point where turning back was anything but another way of dying. By midday, the ground had turned to a patchwork of damp islands and black water. The horses sweated despite the chill, flanks dark and heaving from the effort of dragging hooves from sucking mud. Men stumbled often, leading mounts over fallen logs and around half-hidden pools that might be an ankle deep or might swallow a man to the waist. "Welcome to the Neck," Brynden said grimly at one point, surveying a particularly bleak stretch of reed-choked mire, the realm's one true border. "Southron Knights call it a bog. They've no idea. Do reeds actually live in this?" Jane asked faintly, staring at a tangle of half-submerged roots where something pale and eyeless floated just beneath the surface. "They thrive in it," Jon said, "so long as they want you lost and them unseen." As if summoned by his words, a shaft hissed from the mist and buried itself in the trunk of a tree a hand's breadth from Robb's shoulder. Swords rasped free. Men jerked shields up, eyes raking the murk. "Hold," Jon called. "No one move." Ghost's head was high, nostrils flaring, ears pricked forward. Gray wind's hackles rose in a ridge along his spine, but neither wolf snarled or charged. Instead, they stood poised, waiting. Movement shimmered at the edge of vision. A figure seemed to detach itself from the reeds, small, slight, clothed in mottled greens and browns that made him more suggestion than man. As he stepped onto slightly higher ground, a second came with him, no larger than the first. They looked like children and old men both, faces lean and brown, eyes watchful. "Who comes into the Neck like men on a king's road?" the first asked, voice flat. "Banners hidden, but wolves in plain sight. Men who'd rather be ghosts than corpses on a bridge," Brynden answered, lowering his sword just enough to show he would speak before he killed. "Brynden Tully, once of Riverrun, with Robb Stark, once king in the north, and men who followed him through more battles than he had years." The slight man's gaze moved to Robb, to the gray crown on his head, to the bloody bandages at his side. Then it slid to Jon, to Ghost, to the black cloak and the hilt of Longclaw. "You smell of ice and smoke," he said to Jon, "and of old promises." "My name is Jon Snow," Jon said. "I took the black at the wall. I broke it long enough to stop a slaughter at a bridge. We're looking for Howland Reed. We were told he still honors oaths he swore in another man's war." The second figure stepped forward. A woman, Jon realized now, older than the first but with the same reed-slim build. Her eyes were green as pond water. "My father heard Ned Stark's last words at a tower far to the south," she said. "He swore to keep what he knew, and he has." Relief eased a line from Robb's face that had not moved since the hall. "Then he lives," he said. "And you are?" "Mira Reed," she said. "And my brother, Jojen. We came because the Bogs whispered of wolves running south with death at their heels." "The Bogs whispered," Sandor muttered under his breath. "Of course they did." Mira ignored him, "You shouldn't have made it this far," she told Robb matter-of-factly. "Not with Freys and Boltons and lions all snapping at your tail." Something shifted the water. "I jumped off a balcony," Jon said dryly, "and my wolf bit some men in the face." Jojen's mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile they'd yet seen on him. "Sometimes that's all the magic a story needs," he said. His eyes, far older than his face, lingered on Jon a moment longer. "The currents have been changing for a while. This is only one ripple." Catelyn nudged her horse forward, ignoring the way her skirt soaked lighter where it brushed water. "Can your folk hide us?" she asked. "For a time. Long enough for the realm to grow certain we're dead." "We can hide you from men," Mira said. "Not from what walks in dreams." Her gaze flicked briefly to Jon again, then back to Robb. "But we can try. If the Starks fall, all the neck will drown under southern boots sooner or later." "Your father owes my father more than one favor," Robb said. "I hate to call them due now after so long, but—" Mira cut him off with a shake of her head. "My father owes Ned Stark because Ned saved his life and because he was his friend," she said. "He will hide you because he is Crannogman and the South is coming, not because crowns were involved." "Your father sounds wiser than most men I've met with titles," Jon murmured. "Titles sink," Jojen said. "Reeds bend. Come. The paths you've used thus far are good enough for landmen. But if we take you to Greywater, we must walk on water as much as earth." He turned without waiting for agreement, melting back into the reeds. Mira gestured for them to follow. "Single file," she said. "Step where I step. If you don't, you might find the ground isn't there." Brynden grunted. "You heard the girl," he called back. "Do as you're told for once in your salt-stiffened lives, and keep those wolves close." The procession stretched out again, thinner now and stranger. Northern lords and a bleeding king and a crow in black cloaks threading through a green-brown world led by children who walked as if the marsh were a garden path. As they followed, Jon felt Ghost relax just a little. The direwolf's ears still twitched, but the constant, sharp-edged vigilance eased. It was as if the land itself had acknowledged them and agreed, for the moment, not to swallow them. "You said you'd see us to Greywater," Robb said quietly, drawing his horse alongside Jon's as the line snaked into deeper mist. "Does your promise end at its gate?" Jon thought of the wall again, of black brothers who would hear whispers of what he had done and weigh them against cold and tradition. He thought of Aemon's blind eyes, of Sam's anxious hands, of dead men with blue eyes walking in the snow. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I had to get you out of that hall, and I know whatever comes bay. On this swamp, the dead in the north won't care how many crowns we put on each other's heads if we're all bones by the time they come." Robb nodded slowly. "When I first marched south, I thought defeating the Lannisters was the whole game," he said, voice low. "Now I begin to suspect we've all been playing in the corner of the board while someone else sets up their pieces in the dark." "Then perhaps," Jon said, "walking you out of the Red Wedding alive was only the first move." Greywater Watch rose out of mist like a memory. It was not a castle as Southerners understood such things. No looming curtain walls of stone, no proud towers stabbing at the sky. Instead, low shapes of timber and sod seemed to float on dark water, connected by causeways that shifted subtly even as Jon watched. Reeds brushed its sides. Trees leaned close around it, branches trailing like fingers. "It moves," Arya whispered. It's moving. "It drifts," Mira corrected. "Sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. My father says no map should ever be able to pin Greywater down for men who mean it harm. Today it's here. Tomorrow it may be a mile from this spot or 10. Must make it hard to receive guests," Brynden muttered, eyeing the slick planks warily. "Unwanted ones rarely find us," Jojen said. "You did." He led them onto a narrow causeway that bobbed gently underfoot. The horses balked at first, then followed, hoofs clopping nervously. Ghost and gray wind padded along as if they had been born to it. Within the reed-walled enclosure, the air felt different, still damp, still chill, but with a sense of held breath of waiting. Crannoc folk watched from doorways and walkways, bows in hand, spears leaning against shoulders. They were small and wiry, their faces painted in muted greens and browns that made them half part of the walls they leaned against. Howland Reed emerged from a low doorway as they dismounted. He was not the imposing figure some of them had perhaps imagined. No towering lord in steel, no great warrior in mail. He was short and spare, with hair the color of river mud threaded through with silver, and eyes as bright as a heron's. "Ned Stark's get," he said without preamble, taking in Robb, Catelyn, and Jon with a single sweep. All of them, one way or another. Catelyn's throat worked. "Lord Reed," she managed. "You knew my husband." "Never called him that," Howland said. "He was Ned in the Tower of Joy and Stark more often than not. But I knew him." His gaze rested on Robb. "And I know his look. You wear it around the eyes. And you," he turned to Jon, "you wear someone else's." Jon's hand tensed on Longclaw's hilt. Ghost pressed lightly against his leg. "I'm not here to dig bones out of the past," Jon said. "We came because the Freys tried to butcher a king at his table, and we walked him out instead. Now we need a place to vanish while the South tears itself to pieces over songs of his death." Howland studied him a heartbeat longer, then nodded. "You'll have it," he said simply. "Reed hides those who need hiding. For a time." "For how long?" Robb asked, jaw tight. "I can't sit in someone else's hall forever while my bannermen bleed in the fields and my home lies in ruins." "You can sit long enough to learn from what almost killed you," Howland replied. "You're young, Stark. The young think wars are straight lines. A marches, B counters, C surrenders. But you stepped into a web spun between lions and weasels and flayed men. If you ride straight back out with the same banners, you will not walk away a second time." Robb flinched as if struck. Catelyn's hand twitched toward him, then fell. "What would you have him do?" she asked. "Hide while the Freys boast and the Boltons feast on the north?" "I would have him remember he is not just a sword arm," Howland said. "He is a name. Names have weight. You let Walder Frey and Roose Bolton and Tywin Lannister spend all their coin on this one night's work. They think you dead. Let them live with that certainty. While they do, you change." "Into what?" Robb demanded. "A shadow. A story," Howland said. "Stories move faster than horses. The North thinks you dead, it grieves. Then it hardens. But whispers of your survival will creep like mist. A king who refused to die in a hall full of treachery. A wolf who walked out of a slaughterhouse. That gives men something to cling to besides graves." Jon listened, the ache of his own divided vows throbbing in time with his heartbeat. This marsh lord spoke like Maester Aemon sometimes had, softly, but with words that shifted shapes in Jon's head. "And me?" Jon asked. "I've broken my vows to save a brother the world calls a turncloak and a traitor. When word reaches the wall, they'll call me Oathbreaker and worse. They'll be right." Howland's gaze turned to him again. "You rode south because a letter came with a wolf on its seal," he said. "Because an old man at the wall told you ravens don't fly from king's camps lightly. You didn't ride for crowns. You rode because your blood called you and because you saw a slaughter coming. The Watch has forgotten that its vows were once to the living, not to parchment. That won't stop them hanging me if they catch me," Jon said. "No," Howland agreed calmly. "But before they can hang you, they have to survive what's coming out of the true North. And for that, they may need a man who has seen both sides of the wall and knows that the game played in halls like the Twins is a child's board compared to the one written in ice." Ghost's ears flicked. Gray wind huffed softly. "You can stay here," Howland went on. "Lick your wounds. Plan. The neck is not gentle, but it is kind to those it accepts. When you go back to your wall, you go back with the knowledge that the North has not fallen completely, only sunk for a time. That matters." Robb looked at Jon. "Will you go back?" he asked quietly. Jon thought of Aemon's hands on his face, of Sam's frightened eyes, of corpses that did not stay dead. "I think I must," he said. "If the wall falls, It won't matter who sits Winterfell or King's Landing. But I won't go yet. Not while you're one misstep from dying of a fever in a swamp." Catelyn gave a short, shaky laugh that might have been a sob with its throat cut. "Trust a Stark," she said. "To turn a Frey's neat murder into something as messy and complicated as this." Howland Reed's thin mouth quirked. "Freys build bridges," he said. "Starks live in castles. Neither of them understands the water that makes both possible. Rest, eat, then decide how you mean to walk out of this story." Night came soft over Greywater Watch, bringing with it a strange kind of quiet. It was not the thick, smothering silence Jon knew from the wall, where snow drank sound and the wind keened like ghosts. Nor was it the uneasy hush of a camp on hostile ground. This was more like the pause between heartbeats, a held breath, the world listening. They ate in a long, low hall that smelled of fish and smoke and damp wood. Crannogmen moved quietly around them, setting out bowls of stewed eel and dark bread. No one gossiped or japed the way northern soldiers did. Their manner was sober, watchful, like people who expected the walls themselves to be listening. Robb managed half a bowl before exhaustion dragged him down. Catelyn and Jane helped him to a sleeping pallet in a side chamber. Gray wind stretched out at the foot of it like a living guardrail. Jon lingered by the doorway until Catelyn looked up at him. "You saved him," she said. "In the hall, on the bridge, and now here." "I stopped one sword," Jon said. "Others will come." "They always do," she replied. "That's why men like you have to keep standing in front of them." He had no answer for that. He stepped back into the main hall, where Brynden and Howland bent over a better map than the one drawn in dirt, its lines inked on scraped hide. Rivers and lakes and bogs crawled over it in a maze of blue and green. "We could strike suddenly at Moat Cailin once we've gathered breath," Brynden was saying. "Retake the gate to the north before the Ironborn or anyone else does. From there you sit," Howland cut in calmly. "You put on a new skin and let the old one sink. Freys and Boltons think they know how to trap wolves. They've planned for a king who marches banners down a road. Have they planned for one who vanishes into stories and reappears in their own backfields when they least expect it?" Brynden's mouth twisted. "You want us to become raiders. I want you to become hard to kill," Howland said. "You cannot win as you are, but you can make losing cost so much it looks like another kind of defeat." Jon slipped away eventually, out onto a narrow walkway above dark water. Ghost padded after him, toes silent on the damp boards. The night air smelled of peat and river and the faint tang of something green and growing. He leaned on the rail and looked out at the mists. Somewhere beyond them lay the wall, a white line in his mind's eye. Somewhere beyond that, things moved in the cold that did not sleep or breathe as men did. "I don't know where I belong," he said softly to the darkness. "Here with them. There with the watch. Both. Neither." Ghost pressed his head against Jon's thigh, solid and real. Footsteps approached softly. Jon did not turn until the sound stopped beside him. "You always did like ledges," Robb said quietly. Jon looked round. Robb leaned on the rail a few paces away, wrapped in a cloak, face paler but eyes clearer than they had been since the hall. One hand rested on the wood. The other hovered near his side where fresh bandages peeked from beneath his shirt. "You should be Abed," Jon said, "or you'll be back on your back with the maesters shouting." "They can shout," Robb replied. "I've heard worse." He looked out over the water. "I remember you on Winterfell's walls," he went on, staring north. "I used to think you were imagining wildlings and monsters. Maybe something in you knew what was coming even then." "I stared because it was away from everything I couldn't have," Jon said. "Family dinners, your mother's smile, my own name on my cloak. The wall was simpler. It was just ice and height." He exhaled. "Now I've climbed one wall only to find another." Robb was quiet a moment. "When we were boys," he said at last, "and we played at war in the yard, I always thought if I swung my stick sword hard enough I'd win. Every game, every time. It never occurred to me the game itself could be wrong. The game at the Twins was wrong, Jon said. Poisoned from the start. Robb nodded. I walked into it anyway, he said, thinking honor and the old laws would hold back men like Walder Frey and Tywin Lannister. That was my mistake to own. You paid for it too. I chose to, Jon said. I'd make the same choice again. Robb studied him. When you go back to the Wall, he said, they may call you Oathbreaker. They may try to hang you. If they do, send word if you can. I'd hate to march south again just to cut you down from a rope. You won't march anywhere if you're skulking in bogs pretending to be dead, Jon pointed out. Robb's smile was brief but real. That's the thing, he said. I don't think I'm meant to be just one thing anymore. King of the North, husband, son, dead man. Maybe I have to be all of them in different places for different people. If I play my part right, the ones who wanted my head will never know which is real until it's too late. Jon thought of Aemon's words. There will come a day when you must choose. Oaths and blood. Walls and bridges. He had chosen once at the Hall. Perhaps here the choice was less between and more among. If you call and I can answer, I will, he said. But the Wall is where you belong, Robb finished. I know. Ned raised us to know our duties as well as our names. He hesitated. You know he wanted to tell you something before he died. Mother said. She said he had a look when he spoke of you and of Howland Reed and of a place far to the south. Maybe one day you'll find out what it was. Maybe it won't matter by then. You're making your own name now. Jon swallowed. The old ache of Ned's silence pressed at his ribs, but it felt different now. Less a wound, more a scar he carried forward. Whatever he meant to say, Jon murmured. He still put Longclaw in my hand and Ghost at my side in the end. That's enough for now. Robb straightened with a soft grunt. Rest, he said. Greywater's as safe a harbor as we'll know for a while. Tomorrow, I start learning how to be a dead king who still moves pieces. You start planning how to go back to a wall that may not want you. Sounds like we both chose the hard roads, Jon said. We're Starks, Robb replied. If there were two paths before us, we'd always take the one with more snow. He turned to go. Ghost watched him leave, then looked up at Jon. Walked you out of there, Jon said quietly, remembering the hall, the bridge, the yard, blood and music and iron. Whatever comes next, we did that. Ghost's tail thumped once against the boards. Out beyond the reeds, something cried in the night. Neither wolf nor bird. A thin, distant sound. Jon listened until it faded, then turned his face north, toward a wall he could not see and a war that had only just begun.